On Friday, I stood at the start line of the UTAMiler and I did not run 160 kilometers. I was medically withdrawn at 92 at 6 foot, thanks to good old nausea and vomiting, and some diarrhea. It is disappointing, but whether or not I finished an event does not define who I am as a person. It does not make me kinder, smarter, funnier. It does not make me a better person. So let's recap. So I went into this race knowing a couple of things for sure. I needed to be able to survive the first third of the course. I needed to stay mentally focused. I needed to stay relaxed. I needed to fuel my body, and I needed to get to the Hydro Majestic, which is the 47k aid station, feeling as fresh as possible. And I did that. I planned my fuel better than I have ever planned for any other event or training run. I was so strict with myself. I saw fueling as my full-time job. Once every 20 to 30 minutes, I was putting food into my body, and I was trying to put as much real food into my body as I possibly could. And that worked. The first 47Ks were brutal, and maybe I'll do a recap of the actual race itself another time. I got to the hydro in really good spirits, still running, really relaxed. Legs didn't feel tired at all, in a really good mood, and still being able to put food into my body, which was awesome. Everybody was commenting on how good I looked, which was great. From there, it's a pretty easy run, kind of probably 7-8Ks down to Narrowneck, which is pretty much where you join the 100K course. Felt really good heading down Narrowneck. Got dark on Narrowneck, which I was expecting, and I felt really happy that my expectation met what the reality was. And then as soon as it got dark, the visibility kind of disappeared. It was really misty, really foggy and hazy. I caught up to this girl who was ahead of me, but she'd slowed down a lot. And as I caught up to her, she stopped and waited for me, and she said, "Oh, do you mind if I join you guys? I'm just a bit kind of freaked out, a bit nervous about the lack of visibility, because literally you couldn't see either side of the trail." Absolutely no problem. I slowed down. We walked for a bit. I talked her through a little bit, just kind of dug a little deeper. She was really nervous about Taros. So I talked her down. Taros, again, she was pretty nervous, but she was really good at just kind of listening to me. We kept it really slow, really calm. I talked to her the whole way. And then you get down this really rocky descent off of the bottom of Taros Ladders, which is just really technical downhill. And on that section, I get a call from a friend of mine, Rod, who was also doing the miler. He was well ahead of me. And he was not in a good way. We were very lucky that we both had reception and that he was able to call me. He said over the phone, "I think I'm done. I think I'm pulling the pin. And I can't put food in. I feel really nauseous." And I said to him, "No, you're not." You're not done. I tried to figure out where he was, and I think he was that spent. He didn't really realize where he was. He thought he was on the other side of Foggy's aid station, and he wasn't. He was only just on the fire trail, a couple of Ks ahead of me, I think. By chance, I caught up to him and I recognized him from behind. He was incredibly underfueled. He's a tall guy. He's not a small person like me, and he was massively overcooked at that point. So on the phone, I'd said to him, "Stop, eat, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, it doesn't matter. We're not considering a time goal. Like, this is about finishing what we started." Sat him back down on the side of the trail, and I said, "Where's your food?" So I gave him a waffle and I offered him some of my food as well. And I said to people as they'd stopped, if you have any solid food that you do not need because it is extra, then we'd love it. But I do not want you to give your food that is your quota, because we've still got another 5Ks to the aid station, and that's not I'm not asking that of anyone. One guy had a spare protein bar, which was great. So we took that, just little, like, you know, the size of your baby fingernail, like a little bit into your body, just let it dissolve in your mouth, and, you know, a couple of calories at a time. And we had a whole conversation about what does it mean to you to finish this race? Like, you know, the training that we do may guarantee you a spot on that start line, but it doesn't necessarily guarantee you a spot on the finish line. The distance between the start and the finish is almost irrelevant. What becomes relevant is half of that effort is physical and moving from place to place, and the other half is mental. And the mental strength comes from the determination to finish, to know you've got 160. But the mental side is also knowing what you need to put in your body and making yourself do it. Because unless you are very lucky, I don't think there are many people out there that necessarily enjoy that constant need to put food into their body whilst they're trying to run. It's hard work. Finally got to Foggies, Rod lay down, and we spent about half an hour just letting him kind of rest, tried to put a little bit more food into him, and he made the call after about, I think probably about 40 minutes or so, that he was done, which was hard. And we chatted for a little bit just to make sure that it was the right decision, that he was comfortable with it, because the emotional outlay that comes after that is a bit of, you know, can be a bit of a car crash. And I wanted to make sure that I'd done my due diligence to make sure that I'd done everything that I could to help him stay in the race. And if that had been, you know, death march the next 70 Ks with him, I would have done it hands down. My problem came pretty much meeting the kind of that first girl on Narrow Neck, who, I'm very sorry, you did tell me your name and I have completely forgotten it. When I started kind of looking out for other people, I took my eye off the ball, which is 100% my responsibility. It is nobody else's. I felt in my body the change as I dropped with my fueling, as I stopped putting food in. And so by the time I left Rod at Foggies and carried on, I'd actually vomited when I was with Rod. After Foggies, those kind of waves started to hit more and more frequently. I was very aware of my drop in fuel, and so I really pushed myself to put stuff back into my body, just slowly, and I pulled back on my pace just to start putting little bits in. Got into 6 foot, sat down, obviously wasn't feeling great, but the guys around me were phenomenal. They were not there to pander to my feelings at all. Started to feel good because I'd done this like nice hard reset, and then when I started eating again, the nausea really came back, and I threw up a couple of times. And I think blood pressure probably dropped a little bit as well, because I kind of got a bit wobbly on my feet, and ended up with the medics just to get checked out. And the medics were obviously, rightly so, wanted to see me eat and drink something and keep it down, and I just was not able to do that. It then moved through my digestive system and started coming out the other end. It's a glamorous world, this ultra trail stuff. I was in 6 foot aid station for, I believe, about 2.5 hours all up. Eventually the medics just went, no, you can't keep anything down. It's coming out both ends, dehydration. Blood sugars were dropping, and I was withdrawn from the race. Anyone who knows me knows I am partial to a bit of a vomit. So I'd put it down a lot of the time to my lack of fueling, not putting enough in, even if I felt like I was, etc., etc. That's why the goal from this race was to be so onto it. It's your full-time job. A little backstory. About 3 months ago, I'd had a colonoscopy and an endoscopy to try and figure out why I wasn't absorbing iron. I had blood tests and pill cameras and all sorts of stuff. And the result of that came back that I am something called ASCAR positive. And that basically is a biomarker that they use to diagnose Crohn's. I do not have Crohn's disease, but I do have one of its biomarkers, which is basically like an inflammatory response in your gut to certain foods, too much sugar, too much salt, bad diets, that kind of thing. My gastroenterologist and I, we have had some pretty awesome conversations where, you know, the fact that I'm a vegetarian, which is quite an anti-inflammatory diet, the fact that I am a runner is also anti-inflammatory, and so she's really supportive of my running. And I think the missing link for me now is that I have a pretty good grasp on what I can, what I can't eat in day-to-day life. And unfortunately, the things that I should be staying away from in my daily life are the things that I need to fuel my body in something like a 100-miler. Even though those things and the things that I fueled with, which probably sound a little bit unconventional, but like kind of juices, Ribena, some soft drinks, you know, Cliff Blocks gels, fruit pastels, rice pudding, which is awesome, by the way. All of those things, noodles, and the noodle broth, all of those things that are obviously great sources of carbohydrate and energy, which is easily digestible. Unfortunately, for my guts, they don't respond well to them. And I've been practicing with those in my training runs, and I can get up to, you know, 4 or 5 plus hours on the trails with those fuel sources, and I'm fine. But unfortunately, the effects of that concentrated don't start to compound and see the results until 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 hours in, which I can't replicate in a training run. Now, when I look back at a lot of my race history, there is a really consistent theme of the nausea and the vomiting starting to kick in around that time period. I'm going to be doing some pretty big work around my nutrition and getting some really solid advice around what I can have. I need to understand in a lot more depth what this ASCARB positive diagnosis means in terms of what my guts can handle, how it's going to process things that I put in it at not just obviously on a day-to-day basis, but in that high stress environment, because that's when I need the performance and the energy, right? So I was withdrawn from the race for physical symptoms. I do not regret slowing down to help people. I'm always going to do that. That is never going to change. I could be winning something outright, and if somebody needs my help, I'm going to stop and help them. That is just who I am. It would not sit with me if I put my desire to hit a certain time goal or a certain place in a race or anything like that above someone else's safety and welfare. And if that's the lesson that I get to teach my kids, awesome. I also don't think it's necessarily a bad thing that the kids get to see me fail. Life is going to be full of them. They see the work that I put into an event, and they see that just because you work hard, it doesn't necessarily guarantee you the result that you want. I think that's probably a pretty good lesson for them to be able to see. It is such a privilege to be able to get to do these events and do these races and have the people around me that were with me, both physically there and texting me and checking in with me before, during, after. Like, it is amazing, and it's really humbling and quite confronting to think that many people are invested in one of my crazy decisions. I am honestly 100% fine with the decision. I don't have, yes, I'm disappointed I didn't get to finish, and there's those little, you know, little tinges of embarrassment when someone asks, "Oh, how did it go?" And I have to say I didn't finish, but it's okay. Like, if that's the worst part of my day, I'm not doing too bad. Physically, I felt awesome. My legs were strong. I was still running. My feet held up really well. It shows what my training had done. It shows that the equipment that I was using was the right stuff. There's just a couple of little learnings around the fueling stuff. There's some really great lessons, and I'm looking forward to planning the next thing. And if anyone has any suggestions for a Western States qualifier in Australia, let me know.